file this under an I told you so, looking at the Middle East as it's developing, and I said this a year ago, so I'd like credit for it, then I realized I can't prove that. I can talk to my students. But at least of this date, February 16, 2017, I said it. That is the issue in the Middle East that we're seeing now. Everyone's blaming on ISIS. That's correct in a lot of ways. ISIS developed out of the tensions between Sunni and Shia after Bush invaded Iraq. Those tensions were there a long time ago and in Syria. But what Bush didn't know when he moved into the Middle East was that he was moving into a country sort of on the brink of civil war for a long time, since the two main religious sects in Iraq are Sunni and Shia. And they do get along from time to time on micro scales, neighbors being Sunni or Shia maybe. But once it comes to national scales, Sunni and Shia do not get along. They fought a war between Iran and Iraq in 1980, went on for 9 years, killed over 1 million people, I believe, in that conflict. And that was as much border wars between the two countries as it was the difference between these two sects of Islam. And they believe in their more ardent, the more ardent believers and leaders believe that the other is heretical and outside the faith. So it's no small contention. Historically, it's long and violent between the two. They've rarely ever gotten along. And when Bush went in 2003, Iraq is 60% Shia and 40+% Sunni. And Saddam Hussein was over the Sunni branch. He was a secular Sunni. He was a Ba'athist, so he was a socialist Sunni. But the country, Shia, had been wanting to get control of that country. So when Bush went in, he tried to empower the Shia, which set the Sunni, which ISIS is part of, off into a response. And ISIS grew into what they finally labeled as the Caliphate, which is now sort of an eschatological term. When ISIS says that a caliphate, they mean the end time has come. Allah is setting up his heavenly kingdom now on earth through the leadership of ISIS. All right. Anyway, the point being that what ISIS has done is they spread from Iraq into Syria, in that Levant area, is they're trying to establish that religious control. The main enemy to that is not only other Sunni who don't agree with the radical vision of ISIS, but specifically the Shia. The Shia that believe ISIS is heretical to true religion and true theology. You can look it up what the Shia Twelvers believe and what the Sunni believe, and you'll see those differences. Here's what I'm claiming at this point, that ISIS is not the problem for the future of the Middle East. It will not last. It's going to dwindle. It's not gaining the support people thought it would. Some groups have joined on, and there's still some danger, and what ISIS does to local communities is still a threat. We need to respond to that, and I'm not diminishing that in any way. But at the same time, the future problem in the Middle East is the Shia-Sunni controversy. And no one's looking at it. Everyone's just assuming that everything Iraq does against ISIS is wonderful. Oh, they're taking Mosul. And oh, that's true. But notice who's behind those attacks of Mosul. It's not Iraqi Sunnis, it's Iraqi Shia. Iran is sending the Revolutionary Guard in. I saw this said in Al Monitor about a week ago, and I was finally glad someone said it, that what Iran is trying to do is create a Shia corridor from, looking on the map this way, from Iran all the way through Iraq and into Syria, maybe even Lebanon. Hezbollah is in Lebanon, and they are a Shia radical group. So really, ISIS is spreading and allowing Shia to pull into those areas, giving the Shia further and further control in this region. So what you're going to end up having, if this continues, you're going to have a Shia north and a Sunni south, Saudi Arabia in the south, Jordan in the south, and Saudi Arabia, the whole Saudi Arabian Peninsula. Note, too, that the Assad regime in Syria is Alawite, which is a pro-Shia group. Now, I'm saying there's a ton of love between the Alawites and the Azuli Shia in Iran, but there's more of an alliance there than there are with the Sunni. And the Syrian government is very close with Iran. So I don't see ISIS as the future problem. I think Iran is. Iran is the future problem. They're going to dominate that region, and we're sort of allowing them, facilitating that takeover. And this is bad. I don't think that history repeats itself quite the same. But if you're looking for an analogy for what's happening in the Middle East, take it as the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s, right? And it was the Spanish Civil War broke out, and the nationalists, both Italy and Germany, poured resources in to help the nationalist regime in Spain. That was not the issue. The future of Europe was not going to fall apart because of a Spanish Civil War, but the growth of German military and strategy because of the Spanish Civil War allowed Germany to gain the kind of strength required to march into Poland in 1939. And I tell you that the strength that we're allowing Iran to have in the fight against ISIS, to me, is very similar. We're giving them a broad support militarily, building up tactics, weaponry, alliances, that once ISIS is finally diminished so much it's not an issue, you're going to have this massive Iranian Shia presence in the northern part of the Middle East. So as of today, February 16th, I'm calling it, that the issue in the future will not be ISIS. That is a temporary problem. But the long-term problem is a northern Middle Eastern Shia control at odds with a southern Sunni control. We'll see in the future what Saudi Arabia does. They're already at war with the Houthi in Yemen, who are a pro-Shia group. And so that tension is not going away. In fact, I think that's going to determine the future of the Middle East. So log that away with an "I told you so."